Oh, I think Jerry thinks we're live, which means I think we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping by. Lots to talk about. So we launched this Kickstarter was that just yesterday?
Yesterday. Yeah.
It seems like it's been more than 24 hours. Last night I thought I'm going to sleep like a rock tonight, and that did not happen. It is going to take me more than one day to decompress from the last several weeks. So we are here basically to answer your questions. So we're just hanging out, James and I, in chat. Any plans to make any plans to make a system agnostic version of the book? I don't even know what that would look like. So no. Somebody upstream asked about Vtt tokens, and that that's not part of what we're promising, but it seems to me like that would be something that would be relatively straightforward to do, because that's sort of different than virtual tabletop support, right? Like there's a big difference between a Fantasy Grounds module and just a bunch of tokens that you can load into your game. Mm-hmm. But we do also plan on being available on Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds at some point. It just depends on how our schedules work out.
Yeah.
How much more expensive will the bigger book be later in the store? I don't know. I don't know. Like it might only be like $10 more. I don't know. It might not be more expensive. It depends on if we get to $1 million. We're adding 200. Making a 500-page book is expensive, and it's no joke. But I don't know. $70 is already a pretty good price point. The stretch goals. Oh, that's right. We have Super Chat turned on. You folks don't need to use Super Chat in order to get your questions answered. It does make it a little easier for us to address things if we can see there's a Super Chat for it. But we're professionals at keeping up with chat, he said, foolishly. The second stretch goal says if Layers and Hordes content are too big, it would become a separate book. Would that be a print book? It would be just another print book. I don't know how likely that is. That seems somewhat unlikely to me. But there might come a point where it's like, well, printing a 500-page book might be, and probably is, more expensive than printing a 300-page book and a 200-page book, right? I don't know exactly how it's going to work out. In which case, you would just get 2 books. But I feel pretty confident we can put it in 1 book. But you never know. We'll see. We'll find out. When do I think the books will ship? Sometime after the PDF is done.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Are there any monsters that we can't? Or hello, Hardly Paranormal says, "Yo, dogs, yo." I've been waiting for this since you first mentioned it was something you wanted to do. Me too.
Oh, thank you.
Are there some monsters you can't or couldn't include that you wanted to? No, I mean there's stuff that we definitely want to do that we're probably not going to put in this book, just because, again, the Flea Mortals is intended to replace the monster book you already have, which means we have to spend a lot of pages coming up with better, cooler versions of the meat and potatoes monsters you already have, which means there's some kind of like really cool other stuff we would like to do, but where are those pages going to come from? And to me, the rule is, the question is like extra planar creatures. Like, yeah. I know we're definitely going to have stuff like interdimensional toad beasts. Definitely going to have them. We're going to have the Time Raiders. A friend of mine's already working on them. But whether or not we have a lot of demons or devils or stuff like that in the book, we might have a few, right? But we already have a bunch of demons and devils in Kingdoms and Warfare. And to me, the extra planar stuff would belong to a Timescape book. That's a product that we want to make. And we plan on making. So that's the answer. We can put anything we want in this book, right? We can put any kind of monsters we want in here, but the temptation is for your eyes to get bigger than your mouth, right? And to be like, oh, let's throw all this stuff in, and then we're hugely over budget. And
yeah, exactly. And we're already thinking about beyond the monster book, and there might be some of that stuff gets pushed to that.
Will the PDF be text searchable? Of course. The PDF to me, the PDF is the best way to use the product, because you can bookmark it, you can, grab bits of it and drop it into a Word doc or whatever. You can put it in Dropbox or Google Drive, and now it's on every device you've got. So yes, will we see MCDM mimics? That's a good question. Is mimics on the list?
Yes, mimics are on the list. There's a mimic companion in the beast art, so it'll probably that'll be our starting point probably.
So AQ Ace Fan says, will the Overmind Mini come with some way to keep the small eyes in the air? I believe so. I believe so, but that's actually a Jason question. And the fact that I'm not just saying yes, absolutely, is more out of respect for my coworker, right? So it's kind of his question to answer, but I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Will there be a list of villain actions so you can customize your own monsters and keep it balanced? James Webb. No, that's the opposite of what we want to do, because if we make villain actions generic so that you can just kind of mix and match them, then we have to severely depower all of them to make it so that you can combine them in different ways and not end up with an unbalanced creature. Whereas the intended design for action-oriented monsters is that their special abilities are unique to this creature, and that is much easier to balance.
Yeah.
Dew and Dragon says that we skipped their question about Foundry. Well, I mean, if we don't see it, then it's our powers are limited.
Yes.
Why we can't expect work towards any content coming there from MCDM. I have no idea what's going on with Foundry. There's no, I think that we have contact with those folks and that there was some back and forth and that the opportunity to make progress there is on the table, but we were super busy with Kingdoms and Warfare and then this. So we have, let me put it this way, if we end up playing Campaign for North Africa, then that means we're in a position to kind of staff up a little bit. And then stuff like virtual tabletop support, which we already work on, it just, we don't have, there's not, somebody here has to be in charge of it, right? And we have limited powers. So I believe Foundry support is on the table, but I can't personally speak to it. What is this? Do we have any plans to release STL files for the minis? Nope, that's not our business model. Although I talk to Jason about this all the time. Jason Hasenauer, who is our art director, who could not be here today, sadly. But maybe we'll do a stream with him in a couple weeks. But Jason is super big into the STL file community. He backs Patreons where the only product they provide are STL files. They do 3D sculpts for minis, and it's just, you get an STL file. He's got a couple of 3D printers. He's big into the 3D printing ecology. A lot of his friends who are artists in video games have 3D printers, and they make their own stuff. And his attitude is, I know about that demographic. I know what kinds of people like STL files, and he knows the kinds of things they like. And he goes, it's not really this stuff. Like if we were going to do STL files, which I think he wants to do, it's just a question of time and opportunity. It would be STL files for unique things that only exist as STL files. So, will the book include a cat with dark vision? It might. That's a good question.
I think it might already. The Lightbender?
The Lightbender?
Dark vision?
Yeah.
Oh, I know what they mean, though. In the core rules, the cat, like just the normal house
just
cat,
normal house
doesn't
cat.
have dark vision.
We should have an action-oriented cat.
Oh.
It's just a normal cat that's got action. That's got dark vision. We should do that.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Somebody make a note of that. So how do you take the no long spell list design approach to an expert spellcaster enemy such as a Lich? Asks Butter Biscuit 426. It's a good question. I mean, as I said in the video, there's not a law of physics that prevents us from giving a monster spells if we think it's the right thing to do. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to have to spend half an hour in the middle of the game looking up what all these different spells do and trying to figure out which one is the right spell to cast on this round in this moment. So what we do is we just say, here's a bunch of cool special abilities. They're all useful. The villain actions have a certain order to them, which you don't have to use. You can use them in any order, but if you use them in that order, then it creates a certain dramatic pacing for the adventure, which a lot of people like. And then we can say with these abilities, we can put in parentheses, SP3. And that means it's a spell-like ability. It's like a third level spell, which means now you can counterspell it, you can dispel magic and all that stuff. Really straightforward, really easy.
Yep.
I don't think that language is in the preview.
It's not in the preview, but it will be in the book.
Yep.
So, we're excited to give monsters abilities that are like spells that you can counter and that sort of thing. And, the Lich may also have a list of, hey, the Lich can also scry. So outside of combat, if you want the Lich to spy on the heroes, right, they have scrying.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. If the book is successful, would you consider making additional monster books? Sure. I think there's probably going to be diminishing returns there, right? Mm-hmm. Like if we do a second monster book, I don't think it would generate as much revenue as the first one because you can't open the same Christmas present twice, right? But there's a lot of opportunities there. And I think that there's, like I said, we're definitely going to keep making monsters. Whether it goes into a second monster book, I don't know. It could be that there's a lot of monsters in the Timescape book. How do you playtest this material? And is doing so streamable? I don't know if the testers have ever streamed their playtests before. I know that we have. Like, we streamed a Beastheart playtest, right?
Yeah, we did.
It was actually a playtest for the Beastheart and the Talent.
Yeah, the Talent.
Right? How we playtest this stuff is we have like several different groups of playtesters. We have paid contract testers. They're not full-time, but we pay them every month, and they get a certain number of hours that they are expected to actually playtest, and it works exactly how you would imagine it. They just get together and play D&D. They use Discord and the Miro board and stuff like that to coordinate and all get together and play. And then once it's at a certain state of readiness, it goes to our volunteer testers, which anybody can sign up for. And then we usually have an open beta, which is anybody anywhere who wants to can test this stuff. That's what we did with the Beastheart. It worked really well. So, who's that? Jerry? Is that Jerry? Hello.
Hi, Matt.
How's it going? What's going on?
You might notice that you're stuck.
Yeah.
But you can keep talking.
Oh.
They can hear you and everything.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm trying to figure that out.
Oh, yeah. Look at
The
you.
trick is, can I pose in such a way that when we come back, no one notices? Right? By the way, props to Jerry for accomplishing my goal with the Campaign for North Africa transition, where we zoom in and then we pull out and it's in my hand. I thought that was really cool. This is a great question from the Wombat Talks. What counts as an attack against a minion? Does Magic Missile count? James?
Great question. So an attack is actually defined in the player's handbook. It requires a roll, an attack roll. Specifically, you roll the dice and you add a modifier and you try to beat a target's AC. That is an attack. So that's what we're counting as an attack. So Magic Missile doesn't. There are rules for how Magic Missile works, and I think they specifically call out Magic Missile as an example in the packet.
Hardly Paranormal, thank you for the $10. The graveyard environment is awesome and brings to mind large settings like Barovia from the Earth's Cave of Oddstray. Do you folks have any plans to put out adventure books to complement your monsters? We got to use our words carefully here. There are no plans to do that, but there are desires, right?
Correct.
It would be cool. Yeah, it would be one of the things that MCDM is really, really good at, but you folks don't really have any direct experience of, is making characters, designing characters, and writing dialogue for them. Mm-hmm. Right? And we don't, that's not related to any of the products we make right now. Is that literally just a problem with the cable, Jerry?
It seems to be a problem with the box.
Oh, the box. I had a problem with my box, but my doctor said, anyway. Right, so we have a whole bunch of dope-ass characters already in, like, Kingdoms and Warfare. There's Korsakef the Infinite, and Tristan Vazlor, and Cithrion Aronazir, and I want to meet those guys. I want to meet them, I want to fight them, right? Or I want to run them, and I want to write some dialogue for them. And so, for me, making adventures, like every product we've made so far, the Monster Book doesn't need one, has had an adventure in it, because my attitude is if you have a product that has new rules in it, like new systems, you need an adventure to show Dungeon Masters and players how it works. Yeah. So I definitely want to do big adventures. Like, I really, really like the Beetle and Grimm. Like, when I opened up the Beetle and Grimm Curse of Strahd, I thought, this is what adventures should just be normally. This shouldn't be the deluxe version. This should be the normal print version, because it breaks all the information in the hardcover up into usable chunks and then puts each of those chunks in its own, like, handout or, staple bound thing, so that you're not going back and forth in this one huge tome. I really like that. So I would love to do a box set, adventure. There's a bunch of stuff, but that's just there's nothing on the roadmap for that yet.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who do we have here? Joe Auerbach, thank you very much. Thank you for your support, Joe. Thanks to folks like you.
Thank you. Wow.
Any plans for purchasable VTT integration? We have intentions to do it. So there's desire, there's intentions, and there's plans.
Correct.
we intend on Foundry, Fantasy Grounds, Roll20 support, but it's not part of. Oh Christ, it's me.
Oh, you're back.
It's not part of the promised deliverable. In other words, we're not on the hook to do it, right. But we want to do it. We have good relationships with those folks by and large, and I don't know why I said by and large. We have good relations with those folks. It's just a question of time and production support. Somebody here at MCDM has to manage that, and right now we are somewhat severely understaffed.
Yeah.
So we plan on doing it, or I should say we intend on doing it, but we don't have when I say a plan, things are planned when they're in a schedule and they have times and dollar values associated with them. That's a plan, right? Like we're going to do it, right? Whereas we intend on doing it, we're pretty sure this is going to happen, but we don't know exactly where or how yet. And then there are, there's other stuff where it's like, that'd be nice, but Anyway, let's see. What did Eskimo Jones ask? Can smaller creatures use action-oriented... Can smaller creators, not smaller creatures...
Like cats?
Yeah. Can smaller creators use action-oriented monsters on our own drive-through RPG works? So here's the rule. This is people should just go read the copyright laws because they're really straightforward. They're designed to be understood by normal people. What you cannot do is you cannot use our text, right? That we own. We own the order in which the words are written. What we don't own and what nobody owns is design. Anybody can take any design and do anything they want with it, which is why there's not only one company making first-person shooters, for instance, right? Which is why anybody can make an RTS if they want to. So you can absolutely use action-oriented monsters, and I don't even think we've trademarked action-oriented monsters. I'm not even sure we could trademark action-oriented monsters. So what you could do is say, hey, an action-oriented monsters isn't even really a set of rules. It's just an attitude. It's just an attitude toward design. But stuff like rules for minions or rules for companions or stuff like that, if you want to write something for, drive-through RPG or whatever that has that stuff in it, you have a couple of options. One is to just reference our product and say, hey, the rules for this are in the monster book, the MCDM monster book. That's totally fair. Or you could just rewrite those rules in your own words, in your own, like your teacher used to say in 5th grade, write this in your own words. And then that's your original text. Done. Simple.
Nailed it.
We would love to see people. We opened the pre-alpha version of our warfare rules for strongholds and followers because I naively thought that people would then use them in their own products and improve them, and that didn't happen. So I had to do it. I had to do it for Kingdoms and Warfare, and we were like, well, the idea of opening the stuff so that the community can improve it is a good one, but it didn't turn out to actually work. The behind the design sidebars from the preview are fantastic.
Yes.
That's something WotC should absolutely be putting in their books. Well, I mean, I don't think those folks are, hurting for money. They seem to be doing okay. So they must be doing something right, but I appreciate the 10 euros, Gerard.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the compliment. That's a thing that we decided to do because when we test, sometimes testers will say, why did you do this and not this, right? Why did you go this way? And then when we explain it, they go, oh, that makes sense. And so it's like, oh, well, this is a question that comes up a lot. Maybe we should address it in our, why minions don't have 1 hit point, for instance, is a design behind the design side.
Yeah, if we can kind of walk you through our process a little bit, right? Then you go, oh, I get it. That's really useful. I mean, I'm actually, one of the things I've been doing is I've been somewhat optimistically reading the rules for the campaign for North Africa. And Richard Berg, a legendary designer, the rules are also kind of an essay on the decisions that he made. And it's really interesting.
Yeah. Also somewhat pessimistically.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. Is like, campaign for North Africa is like, it's like, yay, it's like, yay, we made $2 million. Oh, we have to play campaign for North Africa.
Spoonful of sugar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is the Timescape book something more than a monster book? Yeah, it would be a setting book for the MCDM world, which is Orton and Axiom and Primordius and Equinox and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. What does a monster-specific treasure look like? Well, it looks like a generic treasure, except specific to that monster.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at the, in the packet, if you look at the Lightbender, there is a magic item you can make from the Lightbender's main. So that'll give you an idea of what that sort of thing could be. It doesn't necessarily need to be made from the parts of that monster, right? It might be something that they use or they covet or that sort of thing, but that gives you an idea. A monster might also have, like, a prisoner who could be a retainer if you free them, or a pet that turns into your pet as a companion afterwards too. So.
Would MCDM consider making text for the monsters or those mechanics open game content so they can be more easily included in other products? That is something we would consider. I don't know if we're going to do it. I'm much less likely to do that now, having already gone down the road of opening a big chunk of our rules several years ago and nobody did anything with it. So this is one of those things. We get requests like this, not this specific one, but we get requests like this all the time. And it goes back all the way to when I started self-publishing my novels. And people would message me, a bunch of people. It seemed like a lot of people would be like, why isn't your product, why isn't this book on the Barnes & Noble e-reader that I had never heard of? Or why isn't it on this generic open source e-reader that I had never heard of? And I'm like, oh, okay. And I would do a bunch of work and I would figure out, sometimes it took me weeks to nail this stuff down. And I would finally figure out how to get it on these different platforms. And I would upload it, nothing, no sales, like 3. And that was it. And so I was like, well, that's an important lesson to learn because there's a lot of work on my part. And we've had that same experience here where people ask for stuff and we go, oh, and it seems like a lot of people want something. And so we put a lot of work into it and then no one uses it. And you're like, okay, well, the people who want it for philosophical reasons. Like it would be, the world would be better if, but not I'm actually going to use this. And it's like, well, we're more in favor of we're actually going to use it. The villain actions look cool, but sounds like low replayable content. How does this book account for subsequent encounters with the same villain? I mean, that's a good question. How often would you expect to fight the same named eyeball monster? Like, because I think you could have I think you're gonna have the one big battle against that monster where they use all their stuff and that's the finale of your game, right? And then if you encounter him before that, he's not gonna go Nova because you're saving that for the final battle, right? And if you want a super how is any monster in the core rules replayable? Like how is a goblin replayable? Like it only has attack and multi-attack.
Yeah.
So as far as replayability goes, I think the idea is that you've got normal versions of these monsters, and then you also have unique action-oriented versions that you bust out only when it's appropriate.
Yeah, and the thing about action-oriented monsters is they're more than just villain actions, right?
Yeah.
Action-oriented monsters also have a bonus action and a reaction. If you look at a lot of monsters in the core rules that have legendary actions, they don't have those things. So you can think of the bonus action and the reaction as these cool things that they also get to do every turn, and then the villain actions are sort of an awesome thing on top of that for that final battle.
Brian Murphy, thanks for the €5. Is there scope to someday print Monster Pawn tokens? That is not something that we have thought about or planned on.
Yeah.
We plan to make it minis.
Minis.
Yeah. When you play the campaign for North Africa, can various units be named after your patrons and supporters? That would be a great idea, actually. I don't know enough about Campaign for North Africa to know where that would fit in the actual gameplay, but that would be cool.
Are almost as many chits in there as there are patrons.
Somebody upstream before the stream started asked a question that I thought was really good, and I don't remember what it was. I talked about it, James. What were we talking about?
Before the stream.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Somebody just asked something in chat and it reminded me of it, and I can't remember what it was.
What did they ask you?
I don't know now. The chat is moving so fast. If the book turns out to be a wild success, as it appears to be, it's a much, much bigger success than I imagined. I tend to be the most pessimistic about this stuff. Would they be interested in making a magic item focused book in the future? I don't know. I don't think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if we were to do something like that, it would be more than just magic items. Probably we have a lot of conversations about rewards, but we're not sure that it's right for necessarily 5e.
I think James is kind of dancing around what I would say, which is that would require unfucking 5th edition, which I'm not particularly like. I very strongly believe in our monster design. This is something we've been working on for actually a couple of years now, right? And people like our monsters. Even before this monster book, people were like, the best part of these books are the dope-ass new monsters. But magic items occupy a different space, and they're much more closely tied into things like rewards and class abilities and stuff like that. And I think that there's a better way to do it than. I just don't agree with the principle that you shouldn't get a +1 sword till you're 5th level. No. So, but the whole game is balanced around that. So the way we would do it, the way I would like to do it, would be for our own game, basically, which we're not working on right now.
Yeah.
Can we upgrade our pledges mid-Kickstarter? Thomas Mueller asks, you can, at some point, and I don't know if it's before the campaign ends or shortly thereafter, but the Backer Kit store opens, which is where you do stuff like give us your address and your shirt size and stuff like that. And in Backer Kit, you can completely customize your pledge. You can rework the entire thing. It becomes much more a la carte. So I think that's the answer, I think.
Yeah.
You can change your pledge.
Yeah.
Like at the 70 and you want to go to the 200, you can do that.
Yeah, so you can do that right now through Kickstarter too if you want to. If you give $1 to follow the campaign, right, you can upgrade to the next thing and your $1 still counts towards whatever your next pledge is.
Will there be a flump companion? No, flumps are dumb.
What?
No dumb monsters. We don't have. There's no Modrons. Right. There's no flumps.
Well, we did say we were going to make an all flump book on our Twitch stream.
We said we could do an all flump issue of Arcadia, where it's just flump. Flump? Is this just all flump? Like April Fool's? Is this just all flumps? Flump. How many factions will there be in the book, James?
Oh, great question. So I think we have 20 in our outline right now. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of factions because factions aren't just goblins, gnolls, humanoid ancestries. There are also factions that are like undead, spectral undead, right? Get their own faction, or devils might get their own faction, or demons might get their own faction.
Yep.
Golems, right? That kind of thing.
What are spellcasting style enemies going to look like in this, Simon? We talked about that a little bit upstream, but they're going to have cool special abilities just like any other monster. It's just that some of those special abilities will be called out as saying this is a spell. It'll be like SP5, meaning this is a spell like, SP means spell like ability, and 5 means like a 5th level spell. So that way it will continue to interact with, will we make our own game someday? I mean, eventually, yes. But we're actually, I quite enjoy what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So there's not a huge pressure on us right now to break away and do our own game.
We got to make a monster book first.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff, and like an original game would be something we only did once we felt like we had said everything there was to say in the 5th edition space, which is literally years away.
Yeah.
Will it be limited? Does limited edition get its own art? I don't think it does.
No, it's it. Yeah.
That would be cool, but we haven't done that yet. Will the book contain advice on how to run groups of monsters? That's a good question. Do we have tactics and stuff like that? I know we talked about it.
Yeah, there probably will be a tactics section, sort of like an overall tactics section. What I'm envisioning right now could change is the idea of like the roles, right? Like what's the best way to use artillery? What's the best way to use controller, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Because to a certain extent, my experience is with, like, if you watched Dusk, you see a lot of the design that inspires James and I when it comes to monsters. And the thing, this is the goal. Whether we get there, it varies on a monster by monster basis, right? Because there's the perfect ideal, and then there's the pragmatic application. But the perfect ideal is you don't need tactics. You just use these monsters and do what it says in their abilities, and your players will think that you are a tactical genius, right? Like the goblins all get crafty. When you just use crafty, I'm just going to move these goblins out of range, out of melee, so you got to move, and you don't get an attack of opportunity against them, right? All of a sudden, your goblins seem a lot more tactical, right? They seem smarter, and your players are like, damn, my dungeon master is a strategic genius. It's like, nope, I'm just literally doing what it says on the monster. So my experience is that you don't need elaborate language for how to play this monster if we do our job right. Just follow. It's almost like a set of instructions. Just do what it says on the monster thing, and your monsters will be dope. Beastheart Illrigger Stronghold on Arcadia when? I think the Beastheart Illrigger Stronghold stuff will happen after we revise Strongholds and Followers. I've already done some work on a redesign of that book, because Strongholds and Followers was very much kind of like a Matt Colville homebrew stuff. It's not really like an MCDM product as we now understand them, with a lot of collaboration and a lot of really robust testing. And I have a very clear idea of how to make that book more usable. Palladium. Oh, somebody asked upstream about if I had played the FFG Star Wars game, because they do minions in an interesting way. I have not, but I really like that dice system, by the way. I don't necessarily know that it's good for a pulp fighting monsters game, because it takes a long time to build and read a dice pool, and you want something that's fast and quick. But for a more narrative focused game, I think that dice system is super good. Lloyd Richley, thank you for the $5. You are welcome. I mean, I'm glad that my advice, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but the vast majority of my dungeon mastering advice has nothing to do with D&D. It works for Palladium. It works for whatever your game is. So there we go. Where are we? More Gemstone Dragons. Justin Watson, like, we might put one in there, one or two, like, named. That's probably how we're going to do dragons. Dragons, I think of them as being end bosses. But I think of Gemstone Dragons as belonging to the timescape. Like, any extra planar stuff, some of it might be in the core book, like a couple of demons, a couple of devils, because people like those. But we don't want to spend too many pages. Like, this is the thing about dragons, right? Like, we could, if we wanted, we could just recapitulate all the dragons. We could say we've got chromatic dragons, we've got metallic dragons for all ages, right? But there are a couple problems with that. First of all, I don't like that. I've always thought of as dragons as being end bosses, not something a third level party should be fighting, right? Something a third level party should run in terror from. Okay. But also, that would be a lot of pages. That would be a huge chunk of pages from this book. And I think there are better ways for us to use those pages. pages. So I think that when it comes to some of the extra planar stuff, you'll meet a bunch of those things in this book, but there'll be one of these or two of these or one action-oriented one. And then the whole big panoply is going to be like in the Timescape book.
Yeah. There may be, and we, this is not necessarily confirmed yet, but there may be some Gemstone Dragons too in the Talent, which is our next class we're releasing. It's a Scion. Yeah,
because it builds upon, it's a revision of the Psionics rules in Strongholds and Followers, where the Psionic Gemstone Dragons are.
Yeah.
Somebody asked a good question. If Strongholds and Followers is revised, will the revised edition be updated for current owners? Yep. We completely have the power to be like, anybody who backed the Kickstarter or bought it in the store, here's the revised PDF. We're not going to ship you a free book. That would be ridiculous. But if you just want the rules and the content, you would get the new version of the book with all the art and everything just in PDF form. But that's sometime in the future. How do I feel about the Holy Trinity of books? Monster, Player's Handbook, Monster Book. I mean, the 3-book model has been around for a while, but I also like a 2-book model. I also like a 1-book model.
Yeah.
It depends. It depends. Like we don't really no third party. No, let me put it this way. No non-Wizards of the Coast company has to worry about explaining to you the idea of being a dungeon master, right? Because if you've made your way to these other games, you already know what a dungeon master is. So, and I actually quite prefer, by the way, you will not be surprised to hear this. I actually quite prefer the magic items being in the player's handbook.
Yeah.
Because the players need to read these things and find out about them so that they have ambition. Oh, I can get a Holy Avenger? Where is one of those? It's like, Brad, your first level. You got to work up to that. Well, now I've got a plan, right? And so I don't know how I feel about needing to make a Dungeon Master's Guide. I think like a player's book, a monster book, and an adventure would be a good triple thing.
Yeah. Yeah, an adventure that gives you some GM advice as you're going through. Perfect.
This might have been the question, Bob O'Prime, and I feel bad that somebody had to spend $10 for me to notice it. Are shirts available in sizes beyond 2X? They should be at least in 3X, but that's a Lars question. Is Lars here, Jerry?
I'll check.
I don't think he is. But I don't know. Like that. This is a Lars question, and the problem is there are people. Like I'm a.
Yes, we have no Lars.
Okay. People come in all shapes and sizes, but that distribution is not even. Right? It's a bell curve. And so there's a point where it's like, well, there are people out there who are 8X, but it's not cost efficient for us to make 8X shirts. And so the question is, where do we stop that? And as a only until recently 3X dude, I would expect there to be 3X. Beyond that, I don't.
Lars says 2X, not 3X.
Lars says 2X. Lars says 2X. So 2X is 2X.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll talk to Lars. He probably has good reason. He probably has good reasons for that.
There's a question, Benjamin Ford. Lairs are iconic. It's a dungeon and a dragon. If that stretch goal is reached, will it more like a drop-in dungeon or single-room boss fights? It'll be more like a drop-in dungeon. That's the plan right now, anyway. Is that we're hoping to give you something like with encounters, room A, B, and C, D, E, and F, and what you would go through, right? The lair itself, not just the one room where you would encounter this thing. Now, some lairs might have more rooms than others, right? Queen Bargnot's cave probably is smaller than Zoranox's lair, that kind of thing. So our house cat is probably going to live inside a single room house. So maybe that's one room.
Allie Arrowwood says, can you get the shirt as an add-on? You absolutely can get it as an add-on. You just have to wait for the backer kit store to open, and then you can totally customize your pledge. Let me make sure I've caught up with Super Chat. Travis Chase, a friend of mine who works with one of the people that worked on the 4th edition Monster Manual, sent me a message saying, I posted the link to your Kickstarter in our Slack, and that designer who worked on the 4th edition Monster Manual said this, and it was, now I gotta find it because I thought it was very funny. But yeah, that's, if you watch Dusk, you get an idea of where a lot of the spirit of this design comes from. Meanwhile, the 4E Monster Manual looks up from its rocking chair and raises a glass. Good luck, kid. I appreciate that. But that is a lot of people watch Dusk and were like, this is amazing. The giant battle spider and stuff like that. Cheers from Iceland. Thank you, Mr. Twisby.
Yes.
What's my favorite new monster mechanic? I really like minions. I think minions are awesome. I think James's design is super strong, and I'm looking forward to using them in my game.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that I said in the video because people don't know how many of these ideas go way, way back. And it used to be one of the things fighters and only fighters got was you got a free attack. You got one free attack per fighter level. So if you're 7th level, 7 free attacks per round against enemies of 1 hit die or less. Minions, right? That was AD&D's version of Minions. So it's been around for a long time. And it's something that you saw it in Dusk. Like Matt O'Driscoll was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. Like, you can watch it live. He was all of a sudden 30 zombies and they're 1st level. And 30 zombies come out of the ground and they're like, what? But then they start using their powers and they start seeing how they work and they feel like heroes. They feel like heroes. Minions make your characters feel like heroes. So, Warhouse Bar, thank you for the long time support.
Thank you.
A dedicated MCM Dragon book? Well, I don't think we would need one. I mean, isn't there already? I remember like the Draconomicon for 3rd edition was one of the best books they did.
Yeah.
And it was an example of how like anybody could have made this book. The OGL makes it so that anybody could do it. But we're Wizards of the Coast. We have access to better art and better designers, so our version is better. So I would sort of expect Wizards of the Coast to do something like that.
They just put out Fizzband's Treasury of Dragons.
Yep, that's it.
So that's the
Yep. Obed Cardin. Like a lot of art, like this. We don't. I think you folks understand MCDM's methodology now. We don't do stuff just for the sake of doing it. We do it because we see there's a need, right? We see there's a need and we want it. Like, a lot of people are not 100% ecstatic about the monster design and the core rules. That's why we're doing this book, right? A lot of people aren't 100% over the moon about this one subclass of Ranger. Well, we did something about it. So that's where our stuff comes in.
Yeah.
Tips to make monsters more crafty in vanilla combat. Obed Cardin, thank you for the 10 books. $10. My advice is the book. My advice is in the book. It's use these monsters. Players, tips to, let me take that question seriously. Tips to make monsters more crafty in vanilla combat. Remember that the monsters can see the heroes. They have an enormous amount of visual information that they can make decisions off of. They know which one is the tank. They know that one is one. They know that's the squishy wizard in the back. They live in the world with these characters and they know the rules, right? So I think it's totally within reason to have the monsters exploit that knowledge and go after one of the things I often recommend doing is just get a 3x5 card or a note on your laptop or whatever and write down each character's worst save. All right, and that way when because the monsters can tell that huge lumbering fighter probably not as smart as the wizard. So don't use my int save ability on the wizard. Use it on that fighter. Even though these monsters don't know what an int save is, but they know what stupid is, right? And they know that stupid people tend to fail to resist this ability. So that can go a long way toward making your monsters seem smarter and more challenging. Regarding feats in 5th edition. Would we add more? Aren't there an enormous number of feats already?
There's a fair amount, and certainly not as many as previous editions, but there's a lot of feats. Yeah.
Well, but then isn't feats? The feats are a super popular homebrew third-party thing.
Absolutely.
So I don't think there's a huge unmet need in the marketplace for feats.
Right.
Can we please bring back the laser MCDM shirt? That's a Lars question. And it's all about Darkfire's. There's ways and there's ways. We might be able to bring it back, but in a maybe a less expensive or less our shirts are expensive. They cost a lot of money for us to make, right? Because we want really good shirts, and that's something Lars is a bear for. That dude, he's bought lots of shirts from video games that he loved, and there are good ones and there are bad ones, and he doesn't want to make bad ones. And the flip side of that means we need to sell a certain number. And a lot of people, they bought one shirt a while ago and they don't need another one. So the answer is not no. It's just the answer is maybe.
Right.
Physical copies of Arcadia, that's not part of our plan, but we've always talked about doing like a Arcadia omnibus, right, where we collect the first year's worth of issues and put them out in hardcover, or the best of Arcadia and put it out in hardcover. I think that would be really cool. I think it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, again, one of those, who's going to do it and when will they do it?
Any plans for making warfare style units? Units and domains would be super cool, but they're not something we're promising in the Kickstarter. So it all depends on, page count and word count and how much time it takes to get, how much money we raise. Because obviously raising more money means we can put more stuff in the book, but there's a point at which it would push the release of the book out. We don't want to do that. So my gut tells me that warfare units and domains for some of these creatures would probably be something for Arcadia or maybe another supplement. But maybe not. Maybe we can do it.
News from the desk. Lars says we can do 3x.
Lars says we can do 3x. You're welcome.
Wow.
You're welcome. Produced.
Look at that.
Lars wants to make the people happy.
Great insight to how the sausage is made here at MCDM.
Any chance of like lizard folk or snake dudes or frog people? Yes,
Yep.
100%. Yeah, actually, I
Absolutely.
think all of those are on the list, I think. Or at least 2 out of 3 of them are on the list.
Yeah, and I think what you'll see, right, there are going to be bands of things like snake people and lizard people, and but we may not have as many as we have goblins, right? Goblins are a super popular option in the game, which is why we're giving you 12. You might get like 5 or 6 in some bands, so not every band will have 12.
Balazar says, how do I get my character's name into the book as a rival adventurer? That's a great idea. That's a super cool idea. And I can definitely see another company doing something like that. But the thing people pay us for is our ideas, right? And our things later, for some reason, there's a lot of people out there that think Colville's names are cool, right? And that's something they're paying for. And when you crowdsource stuff like that, now all of a sudden, like, my least favorite ship in Star Citizen is the one the fans designed. And they were like, this was a terrible idea. Like, it doesn't fit our visual design, right? And it's like, yeah, I agree, right? So I think that there could be a product where there's a lot more kind of community involvement, but it's not going to be one of our prestige products where people are paying us to make sure that it's good.
Yeah, it's how you end up with butt-face farter center.
Yeah. My friend Rick, whose first D&D character, well, I was his first DM, he wanted his name to be Rocky Roads. I was like, no, this isn't that kind of game, bro. So we just called him Smegma. He changed his name pretty quick. Is there cover art for the limited edition available? Yeah, I don't think the limited editions get their own cover. I don't think we've ever done that before. They get a slipcase.
They get a slipcase which has the same cover.
I think it would be cool to do, but that's a cost of goods issue, right? Which monster is everyone most excited about? Goblin Knight. Yeah, thank you for the $10. I'm for some reason I'm really interested in making better. Well, you know why it is? I didn't think about it until now. I want to meet Count Rodar von Glauer. I want to meet the MCDM version of Strahd because I think that dude is fucking cool as shit, and I want to see a cooler, better, normal vampire. But also, I really, really want to see, and I think I kind of want to work on the MCDM squid dude.
Oh yeah,
I'm super interested in that. It's a big part of. There's always squid dudes in my games.
That's awesome.
Will there be a guide for leveling up rival NPCs so they can grow along with? That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, our NPCs aren't going to use different rules than normal NPCs, right? It depends. Like, are these like the Grim Accord? Are they? They are. Yeah. Can you? How hard would it be to level up the Grim Accord?
So the same way it would be as difficult as it is to level up any other monster because NPCs are sort of the same. So there's rules and advice for that kind of thing in the DMG, but it's not super great or hard and fast. We don't have plans to do anything like that, but we haven't really talked about the NPCs because we just hit that stretch goal yesterday. And so, we'll see. I know WotC actually just did that in their latest adventure, Call from the Netherdeep.
I had a call from the Netherdeep. But once again, my doctor said it was going to get better.
But what they did was they provided like stat blocks, like here's 4 different stat blocks for each NPC, and I don't think we would do that.
Now that Dusk Book 1 has finished, are any plans for the chain campaign diaries to start soon? I don't think we're going to do campaign diaries. I think the chain is going to be available Dusk style, which is sort of a compromise because it's a heavily edited down. All the table talk and nonsense is edited out and you just get the juice. And that means my friends will have more fun because they can relax at the table and we can talk about work and we can talk about people you don't know. We can gossip and stuff that you do at a normal gaming table, and that'll all get edited out because it's not going to go out live. And I find Dusk, I mean, I'm biased, but I find Dusk to be pretty close to watchable Jerry's editing is so good. He edits so much out of the Dusk streams. That's what's left is just the juice. And it's like, this is cool. I like this. And campaign diaries are a huge pain in the ass. It's basically like you're asking me to do all my work 3 times, right? I have to prep it, which is an enormous amount of work because all my content is custom content. I have to prep it. And it's not just that it's custom content. It's always custom content that I plan on monetizing at some point. So I will literally spend 3 hours prepping the chain just trying to come up with what Count Rodar von Glauer's name is because I want it to be right. Right? So that's an enormous amount of work. And then I run the game. That is an enormous amount of work and not a small amount of stress. And then I got to do it all over again in the campaign diary. And it's like, I'm already worried about next week. And because it takes like most of the day to record one of those. Yeah. So I think the chain will return soon. In fact, it probably would be back already now if not for the shipping apocalypse. Any Nordic monsters on the list? Well, y'all motherfuckers going to get a new frost giant. Apart from that, I don't know. I don't know what would count as a Nordic monster. I mean, go buy Trudvang. Trudvang looks really good. I've got a copy of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you'll definitely see frost giants.
Yep.
Dragons, right? Dragon shows up during Ragnarok.
That's true.
So,
how do you determine the CR of the baddies? Well, I mean, our goal is to keep if we're revising an existing monster. The goal is to keep it as close to the original monster's CR as possible. But if it turns out that like the best version of this monster is actually like one CR higher, then the CR goes up by 1. Is that accurate? Did I just say? Yeah.
That's actually absolutely correct. Because we want you to be able to, if you buy an adventure somewhere, we want you to be able to slot in our version of the goblin, our version of whatever, right?
Yeah. The idea is that these monsters should not be nastier than a normal monster, just more fun to run and more fun to fight, more options, right? And that more options can make something nastier all on its own. It's a fine line, but that's what testing's for.
Yeah.
Eastern Shore screen printing. That's a good question. I don't know the answer. I think, what's our normal support email? Like hello at MCDM. Try just emailing hello at MCDM and say, shirts or something like that, and we'll try to make sure that we see it. Mm-hmm. Has anything ever been submitted or considered for Arcadia where you thought this is too good, it needs to be its own thing?
That's a great question. So there's actually something that started as an Arcadia article, but it's because we asked sometimes when we put out a call for pitches, we say we'd really like to see X, Y, and Z. And one of those things is going to be in the monster book, the Apocalypse Knights.
The Apocalypse Knights. Can we say who's doing them?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah.
I don't know if we can't. Yeah, Mark Holmes is going to be has already done the first draft of the Apocalypse Knights, which I haven't got to see yet because I typically don't see the stuff until it's gone through a couple of rounds of revision.
It's really good.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Looking forward to that art. Justice Adair, $10. Thank you for the support. Says, will monsters be listed alphabetically or by type? Alphabetically.
Yeah.
We may have some charts in the back about how to make it easier to find, but generally speaking, I can definitely see a kind of monster book that where it would be smarter to do it by type. But for this monster book, where we're explicitly reworking a bunch of classic monsters, you already know that it starts with a G, goblin, or it starts with an O, orc, so it's much easier for you to find that than if we were making like a bunch of original monsters where you didn't know the names and you're like, I just want some dope-ass undead. It's like, well, then go to the undead section, right? So hopefully that answer makes sense.
Yeah, I think it'll be, because we may divide it up by environment, right? So that section will be alphabetically by the environments, right? And that sort of thing. So there will be those 3 sections we talk about in the book, and then alphabetically within that.
That makes sense. Hardly Paranormal, thank you for the $5. Says, my first outing as a DM was running Curse of Strahd. I was unimpressed with the vampires. Are there MCDM vampires we can look forward to? Absolutely.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, we'll probably get a new generic vampire. We'll get a new named vampire. And it will probably be, as somebody in chat called out his family motto, which is, I do the devil's work. Count Rodar von Glauer.
One of the, so I haven't really started talking to freelancers yet, but I have talked to somebody about the vampire because they've written extensively about how much they dislike the current vampire.
I love that. I love that there are people out there that are like, I hate the way the Seattle company does this. It should be done like this. And then James can go like, ooh, would you like to work with us? We would like to give you money. I was at the pharmacist the other day, and I was trying to buy COVID tests.
Oh, yeah.
And the guy at the counter is like, well, if you got insurance, we just give them away. You get a certain number free if your insurance covers it. And I was like, okay, I'll go all the way back to the pharmacist. And then I said, hey, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh yeah, if your insurance covers it. And so she looks up my insurance and she goes, sorry, your insurance doesn't cover this. And I was like, and I was only here. I was already trying to pay for it. I was already trying to give them. And so I did this. I went, I have money. And she had this look on her face like, what's he going to say? I have chlamydia. What is he going to say? Right? And I was, I have money. She started laughing and she's like, oh, you can buy them. I'm like, good. Yeah, we would like to give you money for your dope ass design. How would you describe something as a definitive MCDM type? Tom Abella asks. What makes something a definitive MCDM type monster? It's clever. The monster is clever. I don't mean that the design is clever. That also helps. But the monster surprises the heroes, right? The monster thought ahead. The monster's abilities know that there are heroes coming, right? And so when the players fight them, they're like, well, for instance, this is like the Blood Skull Hobgoblins. Right. There was a moment, and this happened a couple times actually, in Dusk, where their players are planning what to do, and Matt O'Driscoll stops them. They're like, no, you guys, these things can do what we do. We can't just do what we've been doing this entire campaign and just try to waltz through here like it's a big bag of hit points like a dragon or something like that. We have to think tactically because these things are out tacticling us. But the thing is, all I'm doing is I'm just, okay, well, it says it can do this thing and I would do it, right? Oh, it says it can set a spear for charge, for instance, right? And so when they attack, it's like, and this crazy combo where they impale you and then they move back. And it's like, I hope you got some more movement, right? And I'm like, damn, this makes these hobgoblins, it makes me look incredibly smart. And all I'm doing is I'm just using the hobgoblins. So that to me is classic MCDM design. Is the intention to release iterations of the PDF so we can beta test along the way? Well, that's CH Joe. Thank you for the $5. Thank you for the support. That is 100% how this Kickstarter works. Is we're going to release the monsters, and we're going to. There's no facility for us to design 300 monsters all at the same time. Even if we had 300 freelancers, we don't have 30 Jameses, right? So
big bottleneck.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to do the monsters in batches anyway. And when a batch of monsters is done, meaning it's been written, it's been edited, it's been tested a couple of times, and it's ready for release, then while it is being arted, we'll just release that batch to the backers. Mm-hmm. And that way, and that will, that will be part of the open test. Yeah. You guys, your feedback will inform revision. Disgusting. Gross.
I see a question about swarm tactics. What's our take on swarm tactics? You'll see swarms in the book. There's the war spider, when you kill it, gives birth to a swarm of baby spiders. I sort of like the way that the core rules do swarms, that they have great vulnerabilities. They can move all over you in your space and that sort of thing. What you might see from us is maybe some bigger swarms. Most swarms are just one square, medium-sized creature. You might see some bigger ones, and that might require some rethinks from us. Yep.
Yeah, we don't redesign stuff just to redesign it.
Yeah.
Will monsters have any lore relating back to Orton? Yeah, in many cases there will be Orton lore, but it's going to be in its own sidebar because these are supposed to be generic monsters. There are named monsters in here, right? Yeah. But Count Rodar von Glauer is just a dope ass, like Zornox the Tyract is just a dope ass monster. And when you read Zornox the Tyract, you learn a little bit about their culture and what Tyract means, he who rules with his teeth, right? Stuff like that. Is that MCDM lore? Well, it's Matt Colville's writing, right? It's Matt Colville lore, but it's not specific to Orton. So you're going to get I think you're going to get some dope ass lore. And then if there is something to say about how these creatures exist in my world, which a lot of people are familiar with right now because of the Chain of Acheron and because of Dusk, then yeah, but it would go in its own sidebar. This is not an Orton monster book. Let me put it that way.
Yep.
The preview PDF has been downloaded over 36,000 times.
Wow.
So that was a super important thing to me. The free previews cost us sales. That was my goal. My goal was, because some people are going to download that PDF and open it up and go, nope, this isn't what I want. But to me, this is hugely important that the people backing want the book we're working on. Right, as opposed to without a preview, without a free preview, then everybody imagines their own idea of what the perfect monster book would be, and they back, and then they get disgruntled when it's our monster book, not their monster book, right? And so that's what the preview's for. The preview is there to help make it so that we end up with somewhat fewer people backing, but those people are really on board and they get it and they know what's coming. Oh, Count Diggraves, thank you for the €5. Are we going to be doing templates?
Yeah, that's the plan. Plan is to do some templates. So we'll see how it goes when we get in there. But specifically, this one calls out the Death Knight. I'd love to do undead templates because I want to make everything a zombie or a skeleton or a ghoul or that kind of thing.
Yep. How do we feel about Pathfinder? I don't feel anything about it, but James has it and is threatening to run it for us while we're out here, which I think would be cool. Whether or not we have time because he leaves on Friday is a good question.
Yeah. If I come back for the campaign for North Africa, it might be a good.
Well, we got to bring you back. We got to bring you back sometime toward the end of June, which is not that far away because I bought everybody a special present. And unfortunately, they're handmade, they're custom made, and it's not ready anywhere near now. So that might be a good time for some Pathfinder.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, well, here's a good question from Matt. As an aspiring D&D supplement writer, how should freelancers reach out to you, or where do you find them? What do you look for? That's a great question. So we reach out to freelancers because if we have freelancers reach out to us, that my job would just be reading submissions from folks.
We tried that. We tried that with the Player's Guide to Capital, which is still we're working on, by the way. And I was like, I just naively assumed that there are probably people out there that don't even necessarily have anything published, but are just really good writers and designers. So I said, it's an open call for writers. And I got something like, I don't remember how many, it was certainly over 300 people, and including people emailing me with no work, no example of any work. Just, I think it would be cool to write for you. And I had to read all these stupid emails. And then it turned out, after having gone through literally every single one of these people got a response and everything, it turned out that the people who were worth a shit were the people. The thing is, the types of person we're looking for is not just somebody who's a good writer and not just somebody who's a good designer. Those are both necessary, but not sufficient. You also need to be somebody who has experience working under a deadline with an editor. Yeah. And that is its own skill that is far apart from just being a good writer, just being a good designer. And if you are that person, then we're probably going to hear about you just through the grapevine.
Yeah. And I basically put out feelers and reach out to people. I review stuff. So I'm always all over marketplaces like Drive-Thru and DM's Guild to look at bestsellers and things like that. Reddit, too, is a great place to find things. But I also want to know that you have worked with someone before and met those deadlines.
Yep. Let me make sure that people who are throwing us money get an answer. Matt Banak. All the cool guys are named Matt. $20. Thank you very much. Oh, that was the one we just read. Yeah. Will there be a guide to adjusting HP and hit points depending on PC levels? Darken Raoul, I don't know. There's not gonna be anything in this book where it's like we're not gonna have a function generator where you drop in a monster and then you do these instructions and you get a lower level version of it. The core rules already have advice for how damage should scale based on level and stuff like that. But it would be cool if there was a tool that did that.
Yeah.
He said in a somewhat speculative manner. Will oozes? Noah Frederick asks, will oozes make it into the book?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love oozes. I think oozes are super cool. Oozes are great because, as a somewhat old school dungeon master, I really like if you're running a kind of dungeon crawl game, and keep in mind a dungeon crawl is not the same as an adventure with a dungeon in it. Dungeon crawl is a style of play, and it's one in which typically like life is cheap and dungeons are a terrifying place. I love that space that oozes occupy, where some of them are monsters, some of them are environmental effects, some of them are traps. You go into the dungeon and it's dripping water, and it's like, is it dripping water or is that a gray ooze up there? Right? I love that stuff. So definitely oozes should be in here.
Yeah, similarly, Micah Faulkner wants to know humanoid NPCs, bandits, cultists. So we are going to have 35 NPCs that are unique with a name and that kind of thing added to the book because we hit that stretch goal. Yep. Some of those will have those types of powers. And then we also have like bands that include humans, right? And elves and that sort of thing. So you may see that sort of thing in there, but not necessarily in as like here's a generic without an ancestry tied to it and that sort of thing. But you'll be able to reskin and use them as you like.
Hugo Tremblay says, question, how do you explain the poison feats of the Skitterlings? I asked the Skitterlings And they didn't. I did not understand their answer. I don't even know if it's a language that they speak. It seemed like they just go, and I was like, that doesn't explain yourself. And so it seems the impression I got from the Skitterling was people ask that question a lot. Seemed kind of annoyed. So how would you compare, says Gary Aim, question, how would you compare the price of Flea Mortals with previous MCDM books? I would say it's more expensive. I don't think you need me to answer that question. I'm happy to do so. Here we go. What party size are the monsters balanced around? That's a good question.
So monsters are balanced around a CR, right? And then you have encounter building rules that take into account your party size. Yep. So that's how it works. And so your CR of a action-oriented creature, right? They're meant to take on creatures alone, but if you put a CR5 action-oriented creature against a bunch of CR10 characters, you're going to need to give it some henchmen, a lot of powerful henchmen to make that combat interesting.
There's a couple of good questions in here. Let me try to get to them before chat scrolls into oblivion. Who came up with that dope-ass name for the book? That's a good question. I'm going to answer that in a second. Don't let me forget. What new ideas, asks Iafool, for new creatures do you have, like that corpse mech? That's not how it works. We don't have, that's the whole point of environments and stuff like that is we don't have just a bunch of random ideas for monsters sitting around. We start with what kinds of monsters would be cool to fight in an environment like this. And we brainstorm and we come up with, it all starts from thinking of the dungeon master and their adventure and what types of things tend to happen in this encounter. And then saying, well, what do we already have that there's a lot of? You know what we don't have? We don't have a big, cool, like a big thing or a bunch of little things. And then we start talking about, that's where the corpse collector came from. It wasn't like, oh, I've got an idea for a bone mech. Nope, it started with, well, what kinds of things would be cool to fight in a graveyard that we haven't seen before? So that's, we start with discussions where we brainstorm ideas, and the best ideas are reactive to the environment that we're focusing on and our understanding of how dungeon masters think. So who came up with the dope-ass name for the book? I think it was me.
You did.
Yeah, I think Flea Mortals was one of the examples I used. So this is how we do things around here. This is how I do things. What I did was, I had an idea for the book, and that was villains and enemies, because I sort of imagined, I was thinking in terms of like how many named creatures like Count Rodar von Glauer or Zornox or Borgnat are going to be in here, and those are villains. Named ones would be villains, and then everything else is an enemy. But there were a couple people on the team that were like, does it have to be the X and Y formulation? Can we not break out from that? And I was like, that's a good question. Why not? And so what I did was I just made a list of here's all the different monster names I can think of, monster book names I can think of that would be cool. And I intentionally tried to come up with names that didn't make any sense when you look at the history of monster book names, like just wildly different types of names, just to give different examples. And then I sent it to the team and said, just add any ideas you got to this list. And what we had was like, the first one's villains and enemies. The MCDM monster book, there were a lot of people that on the team who just thought it would be cool to just call it the MCDM monster book. That's what we called it internally, the monster book.
That's right.
Book. Well, we're going to do the monster book Kickstarter, the monster book. I thought Better Monsters would have been a cool name for the book, but other people, some saner voices prevailed. There was Monsters Unboringed. I, and only I, really liked Malevolent Forces as a name for the book. This is a name that I pitched. Vile and Sinister, Malevolent and Evil. Just a doot, as I thought that would be cool. Hordes and Horrors, people liked. Monsters Malevolent and Hateful. Here be Monsters. We await thee, heroes. I like the idea that the monsters in the book are waiting for you. We await thee. And then another one was in quotes, I am your death. You can see where Flea Mortals came from. Fell, Dire, and Dread Beasts. An encyclopedia of horrors, monsters, creatures, devils, and more. Right, there were a bunch of people who on the team who liked the idea that it would spell out MCDM. The Codex Malum, the book of bad things. Creature Chronicle. I wanted to avoid alliterative names and stuff like that. And so once we had this list that everybody could contribute to, I then grabbed the four, just pick some number, the four names that I thought were the coolest, and all of which I thought were good. I thought these were all good names. If we pick any of these as a name, I'm going to be happy with it. And they were Villains and Enemies, Malevolent Forces, Hordes and Horrors, and Flea Mortals. And Flea Mortals got the most votes. But actually, all of them got a lot of votes, except the one I liked, which was Malevolent Forces. So that's why this process works, is that it's not just me saying, it's going to be called this, which I think is cool, and everyone else thinks it's stupid. Let's see, where are we at with this? I want to make sure that... How many companions do we think will be in the book? It's a good question.
A lot.
We don't have a number
Yeah,
yet.
but I mean, if we're dedicating a lot of rule space to something, we will see a lot. So we already know that there's going to be a lot of original companions and maybe some from the Beast Heart show up as well, because they're going to have their counterpart there.
Our psionic monster is going to be in it. Yeah, I mean, they're in the core rules. And like I said, I want to do a squid-based dude. And we have our own new psionic system that we're currently well stuck into testing. I think we're in phase 4 of testing at this point, just started. And that's the talent. The talent is MCDM's custom psionic class. And it's, if you read the psionics rules and strongholds and followers, it's vaguely inspired by that stuff. But we have a much more fun and robust system for that. And the thing is that psionic monsters don't use all the rules of the PCs live for more than 6 rounds. They can have things like resources to manage, but those same resources wouldn't be fun for the dungeon master to manage when this thing lives for 6 rounds. So monsters just have some abilities that are psionic abilities, and they have a rating. It'll say like PS for psionic and then a rating, and that rating is how hard is this ability to learn, because one of the ways the talent learns new powers is by encountering them in the wild and having them used against them, and then there's a chance they can try to learn it. So that's a big part of the design. And in fact, it is the reason we are working on the talent, is because we wanted psionic monsters, which meant I didn't like the core psionics rules. I wanted better ones. Yeah. What is the release schedule plan? Tennessee Tyson asked, probably not Tennessee, TN, but 5 British pounds. Tennyson Tyson. What is the release schedule? I think we'll release the first packet shortly after it's done.
Love that answer. Yeah. That's good.
I mean, at some point, we're going to have to figure out, we're definitely, that's one of the first things that's going to happen, probably starting next week, is James and I are going to sit down and start planning out the packets.
Yeah.
But we don't know exactly. Dine Online says my super chat question got skipped.
Oh. All right.
Super chat is not a guarantee of results. But maybe maybe one of the mods.
I'll see if I can find it too.
Might be able to help me out here. There's not any intention to skip questions. It's just that there's sometimes
a lot come in.
People do not ask super chat questions at the same rate that I am able to answer them. So sometimes an answer might be really, really long, and so a super chat question gets matriculated out. I apologize.
I found it. It is there a monster you're particularly excited to tackle a redesign for?
We talked about
over the core version.
Yeah.
Squid.
Well, I said my answer was squid dudes and vampires. What's your answer, James?
So I'm really excited to take mummies on because I think the current mummy is not great, and I'm also excited to Gosmak, which is sort of our version of the Trask.
Yeah. Gosmak. I'm super down for that.
Yeah.
Otakon SPS asks a good question, but I'm not going to answer it here. That's more of a Twitch stream question. I'm a bit more frisky in our Twitch streams because they get automatically deleted after a certain amount of time than I would ever be in one of these streams. Mm-hmm. Are there going to be Fae in there? Bob Gritter asks. There will be. I mean, we'll probably have an MCDM Mambling Chound. What we're not going to have is, I don't know if there's going to be a Fae environment. There might be. Right. I'm not 100% on that yet. But that would probably be something for the Timescape book, right? Where there's a whole Equinox or Arcadia environment, right? Where you can go to that world and meet NPCs and make a character from that place. A lot of Fae creatures in the core rules, I don't think of as monsters. I think of them as NPCs you encounter. You can fight them. You can. And there have been times when I have used things like dryads as actual enemies, but typically stuff like unicorns, dryads, sylphs, that kind of stuff. They are more environmental. You want this haunted woad to be impressive to your players and feel like an alien place. So you bust out one of these creatures and they're like, whoa, what's that? And it's more something you encounter and you talk to than it is necessarily something you fight. And so I'm not super enthusiastic about putting a lot of monsters in this book that you're not going to fight. You already have those. Like they're already in the core rules, right? For us, it's more about the monsters that the Dungeon Master, it's a game about fighting monsters. So we're focusing on the monsters you fight. So we're probably not going to see an MCDM Sphinx in here because you can fight a Sphinx. Yes, and I have done it. When we were playing it, I had not done this before. I had not played this module before, but my friends had played it before. And so when we got to the point where the Sphinx asked us a riddle, the players who had played through we were 17, the players who had already played through the adventure just went, hey, ask us a riddle. Yeah, I wonder what the answer is. I bet it's moon. And I was like, what's going on? And the DM goes, okay, the Sphinx attacks you. So I have definitely fought Sphinxes before, but generally speaking, I think they are more the kind of thing that you encounter and talk to than they are something that you actually fight. We're going to be doing this for another 13 minutes. So,
okay.
William Byland, the Timescape is the name of my multiverse, or MCDM's multiverse.
Yeah.
Anything intangible? Oh yeah, there's a whole category of incorporeal undead that we're going to be working on. 100%. Swiftly approaching $1 million.
Swiftly approaching the campaign for North Africa.
I don't know how I feel about that. What can you say about Count Rodar von Glauer? There are two things you need to know, but no. Luke Edwards, you know almost everything I know about him. The chat, I'm looking at a question and it's really good, but before I finish it, it scrolls away. So that's super annoying. B-Talks, I completely agree. They are superior. Only a Time Raider could possibly defeat them.
That's right.
What's up? Was that the don't pay attention to me? I'm just coming in here looking.
How do you know?
Are there any sea creatures in here? Yeah, I've seen creatures. Yeah. That's not really what you meant, Allie.
Yeah. Aboleth for sure.
Yeah, 100% on that. Are we going to have our own trident and stuff like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
My question was, are there plans for more scaly enemies, Crocs, giant Crocs, snakes, etc., etc.? I hate how those enemies are run. A death roll ability would be cool. Oh, sure, yeah.
For like a crocodile, yeah.
Yeah. That would be very cool. Maybe we'll think about that if we can find some the right creature for it.
Primal Andrew, when is MCDM's version of these other settings going to be Kickstarter? That's not really how we think. We want to do our own stuff, and that the Timescape is sort of our proprietary world. Orton is the part of it you folks know the most of, because that's where all my D&D games have been set. But those of you who've read Strongholds, Followers, Kingdoms, and Warfare have heard about Primordius, the Sea of Eternal Change, and you've heard about Axiom, the Plane of Uttermost Law. We got a bunch of those things. And we just spent, I don't know how many hours, a lot of hours in Equinox. Yeah. And we have a magazine named after the plane that the elves live on. And that's the Timescape. It's a guide to all those worlds. How would you differentiate your shadows and wraiths and other? We're just going to make them better.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. There's a couple of questions about that. How do we make goblins versus kobolds different? How do we? The answer is you go in with that intentionality and you say, how are these things different? Okay, let's reflect that in the mechanics, right?
It's not really even a question of, there are some monsters that are people are notoriously dissatisfied with, right? So that's a good opportunity for us to go figure out why. And that's how we started on the Beastheart. Was I literally would run around on Reddit in places I didn't belong, asking people, poking people, and saying, "What is it about this, the official version, the official class you don't like?" And I would follow up, and I'd be like, "Okay, but," and then I realized, people don't like it because it's balanced, and they don't want to be balanced. They want to be unbalanced, right? They basically want to run two PCs. They want to run their character, and they want to get all the cool stuff of their character, and they want a pet owlbear that is basically like having another member of the party. And it's like, well, that breaks the action economy. Why do you get to run two characters nobody else does? And so I was like, well, but the fantasy of having a pet is really strong. I think a lot of people want that. There should be a way to make it so that you can have your character and your pet, and it's basically one PC's worth of power, and that's the Beastheart. So we do that kind of research. We sit there and go, why don't people like this? Let's figure it out. But generally speaking, we have our own ideas about what makes stuff dope. So we don't start, we wouldn't start with what's wrong with the core Wraith. That's not how we think, right? What we think is, what makes Wraiths cool? Why do people like them? Why do I use them as a dungeon master, right? And that alone is all it takes to get to the Overmind, the Lightbender, our goblins, right? We don't start by picking apart the existing design. It's funny because our book has a giant floating eyeball monster on it. There's no reason that you should believe me when I say this, but this is true. That is not something we did on purpose, because there are other monster books with floating eyeball monsters on them. Literally, it started with Jason Hasenauer saying, we can definitely make our own versions of these that you would not think of as being just a serial numbers filed off. And I was a little skeptical. I was like, some of these monsters are iconic though, and I don't know how you do it without. And he goes, let me show you. And he spent his weekend 3D modeling an original floating eyeball monster. And I was like, that's fucking cool. That's awesome. And so when it came time so that was the first monster that we visually designed for this book. So anytime in the process of working on this Kickstarter, it was like, well, what should we use as the emblematic? It was like, well, we've already got Jason's 3D model. He's like, wait, let me finish it. That was a prototype, right? Okay, fine. And then he finishes it and works on it, and that's how you get the Overmind.
Yep.
Renee Vorbeck, thank you for the $10. I'm really excited for this, as are we. Thank you very much for your support. Whenever MCDM has worked on monsters, it always seemed like a love letter to 4th edition. Is that the case here? I would say, yeah. I mean, love letter might be overstating it a little bit. It's just, the idea of going from 4th edition to 5th edition, going back and forth between them, it's sort of night and day. And the idea of if you watch Dusk, and I'm going to sound tedious. It wasn't tedious at all. That encounter with the Bloodskull, the tower with the Bloodskull Hobgoblins lasted for 5 sessions. It's like one encounter, basically, because it turned into this epic running battle where they had to retreat and then they went back in and they never really felt safe, right? And it was wave after wave and they get repulsed and they go back and it was completely fucking epic as shit. And the only reason I could do that was because I had like 12 different hobgoblins to play with, right? And it was really easy for me to go, I think these hobgoblins need a little something, something. And so I went and looked at other monsters, and when all the monsters have abilities like this, it is very easy for you to go and grab the Xenomorph alien ability from this monster and just give it to my hobgoblins. Just one ability, one little line item, right? And now all of a sudden when my hobgoblins die, they erupt with, and this is probably how our hobgoblins is going to work, they erupt with bright red burning blood, right? And that was all it took. And I was able to run way more than 5, like 10 sessions just where they were fighting these hobgoblins, scouting parties, the boss and stuff like that. It was super cool. So yeah. Will we be improving upon the, is that open? The French,
it is open.
Godzilla monster?
It is open, but I think Gozmak is our version.
Gozmak is our version of the Tarrasque.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any design elements in 5e that we want to avoid completely? We don't avoid stuff, we fix it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't like legendary resistances. I know some people do, but I don't. I find that kind of all or nothing. I don't understand like what the expected player behavior. This is how I think as a designer. A lot of designers think like this, but not all of them. What is the expected player behavior of legendary resistance? How do they imagine it's supposed to work? Oh, this is a big nasty monster that is kind of we're the players and we know what's going on. It's going to have legendary resistances. So quick, don't use your best spells because this dragon will just instantly save against them. But don't use your worst spells because it won't bother making a save because it's not going to care how much magic missile damage you do to it. Magic missile doesn't have a save. That was a bad example. Right. So you have to find what are those spells that are just threatening enough that this monster will use its legendary resistance and you can burn through it, but it's not the best spells you got because you want to save those until the dragon is out of legendary resistances. What? What? That kind of stuff is just insane to me. So we're like, well, how do we make it so it's a little bit more, it costs the monster something. It's not just free because it's so unfun. It's like Counterspell, right? It's like, no, not no, but not good news, bad news, just bad news. Yeah. Sorry, I just went on that was a little bit of a twitch.
I mean, I totally agree, right? That's how we approach things that we don't like, is we say, why is this in here and how can we fix it?
This is a good question, Goblin Knight. Thank you for the $5. How do you plan on tackling monsters? I feel like I've done a pretty good job answering non-super chat questions too. How do you plan on tackling monsters that are very similar, like kobolds versus goblins? Well, if you look at the thing right now is you only have one example, which is our goblins. But as soon as you see any other faction, you'll get it. Because what it is, it's the crafty ability, right? Crafty is what makes our goblins our goblins. All the kobolds they need something that's not crafty. They need something that's koboldy. And it's probably going to be something where, kobolds I think they're typically weaker, but somewhat less grabastic than goblins are, right? So giving them something that makes them feel more like a fighting phalanx would be cool. So and that might have something to do with it.
Yeah.
But that's the trick, is like our orcs are probably going to have the relentless trait because that's the trait I gave them in the warfare units. And then it's just a question of what does relentless do? And that ability, all orcs get that ability. And then an orc shaman, an orc god caller or something gets their own cool abilities. An orc brute gets its own cool abilities, but all orcs get this one ability, relentless. And And actually, it's kind of like and then we designed that to make it reinforce the orc fantasy, and then that makes them, even though they might be really similar to some other monster in terms of the mind space they occupy, they will play very differently. Paul Spurgeon, I love you, Paul. For $10. No. Thank you very much for your support.
Yeah. I saw Gus Rodriguez had a $10 super chat, wanted to know, are we going to have good and neutral creatures? He has evil players. Well, probably there may be some that show up, but the real intent is like these are creatures that are fun to run in combat and fun to fight. I will say that evil creatures fight evil creatures all the time. Magneto and Apocalypse.
Yeah, this is not, sort of the answer is no.
Yeah.
Right, because our attitude is that the monsters are enemies and the heroes are normally good folks. So that's the base assumption. We're not changing that. I don't think that many people run evil parties.
Yeah.
And so putting monsters that the vast majority of our backers aren't going to be able to use is sort of contrary to our goals. Yeah. I See Dead Llamas, thank you for your support. I made an action-oriented version of the troll from Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yes! Oh, I want to see that.
And my players were genuinely terrified. As soon as you break out, I can't tell you, it's got to be on the order of many thousands of people have watched that action-oriented video and then made their own action. There's a whole subreddit, I think, just for action-oriented design. And it's awesome. Like because I was explaining my thought process too. So if you do this, you become sort of your own designer. Like you're designing your own monsters at that point, and it's there, and the stuff you come up with tends to be better.
Yeah, I saw Ernest Scared Stupid when I was 6 years old, and it scared me so bad that I wouldn't go up into my treehouse alone for like the next 4 years after that.
That's funny. That's a good movie. Any plans on more reverse lycanthropes like jackalwares? I don't know that we're going to have any. But I do. Something we've kind of talked about informally was the idea of using ferocity to make an MCDM werewolf, or it could be any kind of were creature, because that ferocity mechanic seems pretty well suited for modeling that kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde behavior, right?
Yeah.
So I think that would be really cool. Pedro Oliveira says, "Oh my God, I went to check out the campaign for North Africa. You lads are bold to even try to finish one turn." I know. Like there was somebody in one of the first YouTube comments. Somebody said, "Wait, the campaign for North Africa is a stretch goal. Are you gonna buy the rights and reprint it?" And then the next line was, "You're gonna stream it?" Like the idea of buying the rights and reprinting it and sending you a copy, which we're not doing, by the way, that idea was less crazy to this guy than us actually playing it at the table. I completely agree. Is there a farmland environment? Picosaurus, we've got a list of potential environments, but we haven't solidified it yet. And I don't think there's going to be a farmland environment, but that is how we think, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the environments that was on the list for a long time, and then we took it off kind of at the last minute, but it shows you our thinking, was the road. Right? How many times are the heroes on the road and you just want something cool to happen? And you're like, well, why would there be zombies here? Right? Why would there be, right? Well, what if we had an environment that was just the road? And like an Ankeg, I think is that kind of monster, right? Something that just and bursts out and attacks you. So we may put that back on the list, but we may not. But that shows you how we think, is these can be abstract concepts. They don't have to, that's what I meant when they're not biomes. It's not like jungle, Arctic. We're not doing that. Anyway.
Yeah, like Enchanted Forest is where maybe you'll see some Fae show up.
So we're about to leave. It's 12:30. We do put a lot of our stuff, Co, is on Fantasy Grounds. Bring back the road. Well, I mean, we might, Hakeem. A chance for a reworked autophage, that would be cool. It would be cool to feature monsters like that, monsters from the chain. The road seems exceptionally broad. Well, some roads are broad, some roads are narrow. Will batches be released by monster type? I don't think so. I think the batches, my naive, unexamined assumption right now is that a given batch of monsters is going to have a mix of like, here's one faction, here's an action-oriented monster, here's an environment, right? So that we can get them all done. Yes, Mr. Evil Falcon, thank you for the €5. We do feel that.
Yeah. What? We do. Yeah.
If we didn't feel that, why would we? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one reason that I think that it's better is it allows goblins to use their bonus action to do something else, which you see a lot in the stat block.
Yep.
So that's fine.
Yep. No shade on the Seattle folks. Like the core rules of any RPG are always sort of a mess because you've got to, each hand is trying to wash the other hand, right? You're trying to design the PC rules, and you're trying to design the monster rules at the same time. And it's like, well, the monster hand does not know what the PC hand does yet because this isn't finished. And so I think when you look at how the core rules use bonus actions and reactions, there's often occasionally some, not often, there's occasionally some conflict there where it's like, but there's a better use for this bonus action probably. Or now I can't do this because I only got one bonus action. And it's like, well, that was 8 years ago. They didn't know exactly how that was going to play out. We do now. The $1 million stretch goal, BT Malo, is layers for the action-oriented monsters, layers and unique treasure hoards. So you get a map of their if it's Zoronox, the Tyract, it's probably his tower. It's probably multi-level. There's probably no way in on the ground floor because he can levitate, right? And Queen Bargnot's probably going to be a cave or something like that. It's going to be unique, easily used for your game drop in. Did you think using ferocities as a base for base? That's why, Marco Bizzari, thank you for the €5. Yeah, I think ferocity has actually a couple different applications. There could easily be, and we've talked about this, but we haven't done any work on this. There could easily be a barbarian subclass, maybe as an expansion for this, or maybe in Arcadia that uses ferocity. So let me ask you folks a question before we leave. How do you folks feel this chat went? Do you folks feel like you watched this chat and you have a broad understanding of how we're approaching this product and we answered a bunch of good questions?
Yeah.
I want to make sure, I don't want to leave. Thank you, Trendane Sparks.
Thank you, Trendane.
For you to have felt like it was pretty good.
There we go.
If you like this chat and you want more chats like this, I stream several times a week on Twitch.
It's great.
And I like the Twitch streams are going to stay Twitch streams because they get automatically deleted, which means I can rant and go, and then I don't have to worry about years from now something stupid that I said coming back to bite me in the ass. Let's see, hang on a minute. Gnolls and bugbears, yes.
Yep.
I love the bugbear. Gnolls and bugbears are some of my favorite monsters.
They're great.
Oh, Siege of Castle Ren. I'm glad you like it, Devereaux. Thank you for the $10. Yeah. I'm really proud. I don't write those adventures. I write the outline. And those outlines are long. Usually those outlines are like a third the length of the actual adventure. Right. So it's this great combination of my adventure design ideas, but then we partner with experienced writers and they plus it. And I'm like, I remember Pinna, when I met Pinna, I think James Hake wrote the adventure for Star Wars. I was like, oh, I fucking love Pinna. He did such a good job with her. So that's it, folks.
Cool.
Thanks for hanging out. We're going to talk. Any chance of a shout out for the Fantasy Grounds module for the Flea Mortals preview? Is there a Fantasy Grounds module for the preview?
There is a Fantasy Grounds module for the preview. Cool. Me and Unique led the design of that, one of our testers, along with, let's see, there was somebody else who worked on that as well. But it was great. Thank you so much for doing that. Segal, I believe, is the other test. I think that's how you pronounce their Discord name. If I didn't pronounce that correctly, I apologize. But they did a great job getting it out, and it was very last minute too. And they really put it together. So great job.
Travis Winkus is like, it was great, but my super chats were missed. Super chats are not a guarantee of we don't have sometimes it takes me 10 minutes to answer a question, and the super chats come and go. So I tried to explain when we first started, but I don't think I was explicit. Yeah. I said. Yeah,
I saw some repeated super chats too. There were a lot of questions about virtual tabletops and stuff that we answered at the beginning.
Yeah.
So your question may have been answered as well.
Yeah, there was a lot because people jump into the chat and they have a lot of the same questions. Luke Amstutz asked a question which I'm not going to repeat because I don't want to give people ideas, but we would love to do something like that, but that's very much outside our current core competencies. So that would require some growth here, some staffing, and we already have a long list of, if we're going to staff up, shoring up the existing deficiencies. But something like that is definitely, let me put it this way, it's on the roadmap.
Yep.
Whether or not it happens or when it happens, we don't know. What's my favorite vanilla monster? It depends on, I don't really have favorite monsters, Cody. I think of monsters like, I don't have like a favorite knife, right? If I'm trying to cut a loaf of bread, a bread knife, actually, a butter knife does not help me cut this loaf of bread, right? If I'm trying to cut steak, right, it's just a question of, well, this is the tool for the job. And so it has a lot to do with, I don't start with this monster is super cool. I'm going to design an entire campaign so that I can run it. I'm like, what are the players doing? Where are they going? What's right for this adventure? What level are they? And then often I'm like, well, there's nothing that inspires me, and I end up going through other monster books, or I go through war games and stuff like that, where the monsters just seem cooler. All right, folks, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your questions. People asked a bunch of really good questions. I really enjoy doing this. Frankly, thanks to James for sharing the prompt with us. And have you ever played a doppelganger? Yeah, you should watch The Chain of Akron.
Yeah.
There's a couple of, in fact, Lars sort of called me out on that. It's like, no more of this identity crisis bullshit. I know you love The Thing. I know you like John Carpenter's The Thing, but does and I was like, okay, fair enough. A good call. Oh, that's a good question. The name and donuts. Yeah, we should definitely add the whole fact. The way Kickstarter does frequently asked questions is really weird and somewhat annoying. But we're definitely going to update the Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's actually Anna's working on it right now.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for hanging out, and we will be. The next time you will see me will be Friday night on Twitch, probably around 5:00 in the evening. We'll hang out for a couple hours, and then we're currently in the middle of a Twitch series where we listen to the BBC radio, the 1981 BBC radio production of The Lord of the Rings in its entirety. And we're on episode 6 or 7 is coming up. Not tonight and not tomorrow night, but Friday night we pick it back up. And it's super cool and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great.
So, yeah, until next time, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all your super chats. I tried to do a good job of making sure that not only super chats got answered, but there were a lot of people in chat. And so some super chats we missed, but come by Twitch and hang out and we'll answer your questions. And go watch the stream from the beginning, because a lot of people came in and they super chatted questions that we'd already answered. So until next time, folks, James, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Matt.
No problem. Until next time, be seeing you.
Flee, mortals. Flee, mortals.